I believe this will be very helpful for those of you who are trying to cultivate or grow thick locks, for people who are thinking of maybe combining their locks to be thicker, or maybe you want to pull one of my numbers and comb them out and start a whole new set. Before you do that, before you do any of those things, I do want to share with you some things that I wish I knew personally before I started thick locks, and also things that I'm actively learning as my locks are growing. If you don't currently have thick locks, it's okay. Just some things you may want to think about if ever you decide to transition to thicker locks. For those of you that may be new here, maybe you've just started following my journey, I welcome you. I'm glad you're here. My name is Jocelyn Renee, and you can think of me as your digital loctician. So, do you even believe that thick locks are easier to maintain than traditional locks? Because I hear a lot of conversation that says, oh my gosh, I have 105 locks right now. I just wish that I only had 25 locks. It'd be so much easier. I won't even have to deal with all this hair. I'm gonna go ahead and combine all my locks to make them thicker because it'll be so much easier. So let me get a 1 in the chat if you think cultivating or having thick locks is easier. Press a 1. Press a 2 if you're comfortable. You think, micro locks, sister locks, traditional locks, like it's all the same. It's fine. It's all equivalent throughout the board. So press a 1 if you think thick locks is easier. A 2 if you think all locks are about the same. It's really, relative to the person's skill set. Let me just share some information. Not even information, but from my experience with thick locks, personally cultivating my own thicker set of locks, and also cultivating thick locks behind the chair for the guests that come to me in the salon. What I've learned with thick locks that I feel like a lot of people don't consider is that, yes, it is easier to start the thick locks, and you do have less locks. And when you go to retwist, sure, you can get it done. My retwists now are 35 minutes-ish. That's all well and good. But it wasn't always like that. And I personally only have 36 locks. And I'm a loctician. So, I cultivate locks as my job, and I also have my own locks. So it's like I have consistent practice. When I was growing my locks, and also for my guests behind the chair that are growing and cultivating thick locks, the grooming of thick locks is so, it requires so much intention, so it can take so much time. So you can just quickly retwist the roots and clip it and then go, but then where you end up, it's not problematic, but people end up feeling some type of way, we'll just say that, is with the flatness of it, because thicker locks, you have more space for it to expand. You start laying on it, you start not air drying it. So we're going to talk about dryer time, and then the locks start growing flat. Not to say there's anything wrong with flat locks, but most people are striving to have cylindrical, round shaped locks. And so with thick locks, you have more space for them to grow flat, because if you're not spending a good amount of time cultivating them, and by cultivating them, I don't mean just, retwist at the root. No, you got to groom the entire shaft, make sure all of those hairs are controlled. You got to make sure your clip placement is on point. If it's not, then you start getting indentations in your locks. The cultivation of thick locks, it's not as mindless is the word that comes to mind, but it's not, I don't say mindless, it's not as hands off as you can be if you have micro locks or if you're interlocking or something like that. So really thinking about how thick locks makes you spend more time in the beginning stages to shape them. Thick locks, we're going to talk about, I don't want to say we're going to talk about the bad things. We're going to talk about the things that people don't talk about. The other one is dryer time. Siobhan said it. I'm going to reiterate it. yes, you have less locks. Yes, you easy time for the retwist, considering. When your locks become mature, there's no longer space for you to be air drying. That's not a thing. 2-3 years in, well, I'll give it 3 years. I'll give you a good 3 years where you can kind of air dry them. 3 years, you're not air drying anymore. The locks are too thick. The dampness that stays within the locks, it doesn't go away without concentrated heat. What that means is that you're prone to mildew in your hair. And people like to think of mildew as, something that you can see, something that's like on the outside. Like you see mold, you see like, oh, it's green stuff. You see rotten fruit, vegetables. Oh, you can see the mildew. No, mildew is like an odor. So you have some thick locks, and then that smell can go away. You can start spraying stuff on it to make it smell good. But the moment you wash your hair, you put some water to it, it's coming back. Okay, so mildew is a really common issue with people that have thick locks. And Tamika says, I'm a dryer dodger. If you're a dryer dodger, thick locks is not the way to go because you have to sit under the dryer. It's non-negotiable. And my locks now, I wouldn't even say mine are like the thickest. They used to be really thick. I feel like they've really condensed to more of like a medium size. But y'all, I'm under the dryer for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, like minimum. In addition to the thickness, the length, as they get longer, also more time to dry. So really keep that in mind. The other thing about thick locks, again, that I don't find a lot of people taking into consideration is that thick locks are not caused, I'm gonna say caused, they're not created by neglecting your hair. They're not created because you didn't do anything. If someone is telling you, if you want thick locks, don't retwist your hair for 4 months, or I only retwist my hair twice a year. And so you're like, oh, I'm gonna do that, and my locks are gonna be thicker. Don't fall for it. Please don't fall for it, because that is not the way that thick locks are cultivated. Thick locks are a result of the foundation, how your hair is started at the root, the part. The part is going to define the size of your lock. Now, because of that, and we talked about this several times before with your parting system. If you've never been on lives, when I say lives, I mean these conversations, go back a couple weeks and we talked about parting systems and why parting systems matter. With thick locks, you can over-direct your hair at your root, which causes your locks or your root to start thinning every single time you retwist your hair. And so I have a question tonight about thinning. And so we're going to talk about that. But thinning, it's crazy to think that thinning also happened a lot of times with people that have or are trying to have thick locks because the foundation of them was not started appropriately, or they try to combine their locks to make them thicker, which messed up their parting system, which then caused them to start thinning at the root. Okay, it gets deep, it gets layered. So what I want you to take from that, I don't want to confuse you. What I want you to take from that is that the foundation of your lock is going to determine the size. If you are trying to get a thicker lock and your parting system cannot support that, what's going to happen is not going to be thicker locks. It's going to be thinning at the roots. Okay, so be very, very mindful about combining your locks. That's why we did the whole live about combining. I feel like we're building on what we've been learning. Parting systems, combining, now thick locks. Okay, the next thing that I don't think people take into consideration, or that I feel like people overcomplicate in a way, is styling thick locks. Who here has felt like, or maybe even considered getting thicker locks and was like, I can't do that because I can't style it. I can't get no styles because my locks are thick. I want to be able to do, I don't even say I don't even know what you want to do, because a lot of times people are stopping themselves from going for what they want because they put some imaginary roadblock there about what the locks can and can't do. But what I want you to consider with thick locks, even comparing them to micro locks, you can do a lot of styles with thick locks. You can do them. And it's especially easier to do them when they're shorter. And by shorter, I mean like to the shoulders. That's like the sweet spot for styling. But it is almost there's a ceiling with styling thicker locks as they become longer, because it's so much hair that you're trying to put into a certain space that it can be uncomfortable. Your neck can start aching. The tension at your roots can be too tight. So be mindful. If you're somebody who likes to do all the styles, like every other week you're trying to switch it up, do all the things, thick locks may not be for you, but thick locks are still very versatile. So don't let that discourage you. And Paint Surfing says thick locks look regal. They do look very regal. They do look, I feel like they have a uniqueness to them, just because traditional locks are such the like norm, the commonplace with locks. Thick locks are just like, oh, that's a little bit different. But also just know that person's sitting on the dryer for a very long time. And they have spent a long time cultivating their hair. The other thing that I want you to really like, this is the most important thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about thick locks. Ready? With thicker locks, okay, the part of the process that is most complicated, that requires the most energy, that is, in my opinion, the most daunting, is the shampoo. Shampooing thicker locks is nowhere near as easy as shampooing traditional size locks, because with thicker locks, you have so much hair and the locks are so thick, you have so much product. I don't want to say product, but so much shampoo that needs to go through, that needs to penetrate that lock, pull things up, and then you have to try to rinse that out. The rinsing of thick locks, let's take, for example, you have traditional size locks, maybe you've been cultivating them for like 3-4 years. You're probably rinsing a good 7 minutes. I say 7 minutes, you can get a nice thorough rinse out. You need to triple that to getting out shampoo in thick locks. It requires so much rinsing. In addition to rinsing, you need your water pressure to be high. So I personally shampoo my locks in the shower. Y'all, I have to dunk my head. I have to literally put my head under the bathtub faucet to get enough water pressure just to get all the shampoo out. Yes, it's so much. Siobhan says, I'm in the sink for an hour. You are really, the rinsing is crazy. Miss Independence says, so true. And your locks are still short. It requires so much. So when you think about thick locks, yes, they are very regal. They are very beautiful. They are very unique. Not everyone has them. Not everyone can cultivate them, because, you know, there's a lot of things that go into even achieving thick locks. But for the people that have them, don't think that just because the lock is thick or just because they have less locks, that the grooming and the maintenance of them is easier, because there's so many other things in the back end and over time that kind of outweigh the pros or the advantages that you face or you see in the beginning, because the dryer time is longer, the shampoo is longer, the styling can become a little bit more complicated. the parts, if they are not appropriate, it can start leading to thinning. So be very, very careful when you're over there looking at the grass being greener on the other side. That's not always true. It's not always true over there, okay? Sometimes where you need to be is right where you're at, all right? So that was my spiel about thick locks. Just some things to think about. I feel like there's a really big trend right now with everyone like, oh, I want a thick locks, oh, I want wigs, oh, I want to combine my locks. And it's just like, y'all don't even know what you're getting into. If you are interested in joining the text club, you can head over to curlynewgrowth.com/community. I would love to have you.